Canada Gairdner Whiteman Award is given annually to a Canadian scientist specifically, a Canadian scientist who's made internationally recognized research contributions and also shown outstanding leadership in Canada, resulting in advances in biomedicine nationally and internationally. And it's hard to think, I would say, of a candidate who exemplifies those criteria more than this year's awardee, Dr. Antoine Hakim. Dr. Tony Hakim is Emeritus Professor of Neurology at the University of Ottawa in Ottawa, Canada. And he has been awarded for outstanding research into stroke and its consequences and championing stroke prevention and treatment strategies in Canada and beyond. I'd like to invite Tony Hakim to come to the stage, and his music is Johann Sebastian Bach, Orchestral Suite No. 3 in D major.
Thank you all for being here, and thank you for helping me celebrate this very special moment. Johann Sebastian Bach cures all my ills at all times. I am indeed greatly honored to be the recipient of this year's Canada Gairdner Whiteman Award. This is a very, very special event in my life. Dr. Rappioli today told us how life expectancy has been increasing and how there was this cover of Time magazine where people were expected to live to 140 years. So I want to thank the Gairdner Foundation for recognizing me so early in my career. It's been a real privilege to play a role in converting stroke from this catastrophic event that suddenly would affect an individual and significantly handicap them and suck down into the vortex of care his or her environment whenever this event would suddenly occur. The Canadian Stroke Network, not, as I said in my video, not Tony Hakim, but I was surrounded by a team of very committed individuals. And most of the time, all I had to do was get the hell out of the way because those guys were launching. And so this was a team effort. We were all absolutely convinced that there was something there that we could do to work towards converting this sudden catastrophic event into a passing handicap. And in fact, that's exactly what the Canadian Stroke Network was able to accomplish. It is a special privilege to be able to say that Canada was viewed as a world leader in stroke care. I am grateful to the funding agency. The Canadian Networks of Centers of Excellence is a Canadian invention. No other country in the world really has that kind of a format to support science and to support care. And it is intended to bring knowledge to where it really matters. The Canadian Stroke Network's activities became recognized around the world as the model to be followed. And for Canada, that's a big deal. We were told that the Canadian best practice guidelines that we developed in this country, in fact, were the only guidelines that the World Stroke Organization approved of and followed. And so my conclusion was, this country of ours, Canada, is small enough to be organizable from coast to coast and big enough to have an international impact. So I'm grateful to the funding agencies for believing that scientific knowledge applied to society can be beneficial not only to the individuals saved by the process, but also to the Canadian economy. We cost you, the taxpayer, every year as part of the Canadian Stroke Network somewhere around $5 million. It is estimated that the return into the Canadian economy from just busting the clot is somewhere between $50 and $100 million a year. Applying science to society is not a cost, it's an investment. This region of the brain that gets impacted by a stroke and holds its breath for a few minutes, resulting in deficit, but when that clot gets busted, it goes back to living normally and suddenly the deficits improve. That part of the brain called the penumbra had been described in animal models. And we had the opportunity at the Montreal Neurological Institute, because we had an imaging facility that did positron emission tomography and CT scanning, et cetera, to study stroke patients in the acute phase of their illness. And to them, I owe a great deal of gratitude when their world had just collapsed, when the roof had just come down on their heads, to allow us to study them as extensively as we did, because that was what gave us the opportunity to prove that this region of the brain called penumbra, the half shade, the part that is resulting in deficit and will die if you don't give it back its blood supply, but you've got 3 or 4 hours to get your act together. And it became, I owe them a debt of gratitude for allowing us to put them through the discomfort of the studies and reach the conclusions that we reached and upon which the network of centers of excellence allowed us to act. I am also very grateful to the Heart and Stroke Foundation and the team at the Canadian Stroke Network, as I have already mentioned, who were as committed as me to punch forward in our goals to convert stroke into this temporary handicap. I am also grateful to the University of Ottawa. They invested in us. When we obtained the network of centers of excellence, the University of Ottawa came on board and said, good, how can we set you up? How can we make you successful? The Ottawa Hospital Research Institute clearly also was on board, and I have today the great honor of seeing so many of my colleagues here from Ottawa to celebrate this with me. Finally, I am incredibly grateful to my family, and particularly my wife, for her enormous support. I am here as Janet, Janet needled me a little bit about how many members of my family were here. It was, what is this? We're going to turn over the whole party to the Hakims. And I said, no, relax, but two of my siblings are here, my 3 children are here, and I must say I have received enormous support from them, but particularly from my wife, Mary, who in her own right is a scientist and a clinician, but there were many times where Tony said to Mary and the kids, go down to the beach, I'll be right there. And, supper time, they would come up and I'd still be on my computer. So the kids got to spend a great deal more time with my wife than they did with me, which is probably why they turned so well. So I am very grateful. Thank you all very much.